So
Okay.
the project, we're calling it the Dreams of the Founders. And the reason for the project is I got a passion a few years ago, actually more than a few years ago, 7, 8 years ago, to start interviewing the founders before they died. And I had the good fortune of interviewing John Guyman, Gail Stevens, Ian McWhinney, Tom Lehman, and I asked them some questions about their vision, some questions that I'm about to ask you, and they shared that with me. And then I wrote a summary, and I sent it to them and said, did I get it right? And they each responded with an email message that essentially confirmed that I had gotten it right, and that they added, some comments clarifying certain things that they said. So that was the Dreams of the Founders. Well, I shared that a few months ago with a group of young leaders, family physician leaders, who got excited about this whole idea of hearing from the founding generation. Then we got to talking, and we realized that the founding was really a two-part act. Certainly there was the Ians and the Gales and the Toms who brought practices in and started academic practices, but it was also the early and first responders. If medical students didn't say, I want some of that, the founding wouldn't have mattered very much at all. So we are also interviewing people in leadership positions, especially, who were part of that early founding or early responding. And so I want to ask you some of the questions. And first of all, let me ask Cinda, when did you graduate from medical school?
77.
And when did you start your family medicine residency?
Right away at the University of Kansas.
Okay. And what drew you to that? I mean, at that point, family medicine was still, a lot of people said it was family practice at the time. A lot of people said it would never fly. What made you respond?
A series of things that happened at UCLA where I went to medical school. And so there was no family medicine at all. And then the year I started medical school, so a couple things happened. So first of all, let me go back to the year before I started. My husband was in the class ahead of me. He was the real Californian. And so the day that he was starting, we were invited to a dinner, and it turned out that dinner was at Santa Monica residency, which had already started. And they invited all medical students, and of course we all came because it was a free meal. And
sure.
So we sat there, and the person who was the residency director was Tom. Now I'm going to forget his last name. Tom, who became the head of the academy a couple years later.
Stern.
Yeah, Tom
Stern.
Right. And so he gave the presentation, and so why do you want to be a family doctor? And so we ate and we heard what it was to be a family doctor. And not to come to premature closure, but that's what happened. I listened to the presentation and I said to myself, I think that's me, because all the things that he said about what the people are like that would like family medicine, and he said family practice at that time, and
sure.
And what you did, and you did everything, and everything looks good to me, and that all sounded good. And in addition to that, a family doctor was the only type of doctor I had ever known, because I'm originally from a really small town in Kansas, and then I mostly grew up in Kansas City area, but started out as the town was unincorporated when I lived there, and the doctor that I went to as I was growing up most of the time lived up the street, and he was a general practitioner, and I'd run up the street with my mother, and he'd look in my mouth or something. And then beyond that, I went to family doctors. So our family didn't do specialists and was pretty healthy, and I was just an only child. Anyway, so that was my background, that was what a doctor was and what they did, and so that sounded good. So then the next year, I started medical school, because I was, like I said, a year behind, and we were invited to the same dinner. And so another free meal, and we went, and after that one I said, okay, I've heard this twice, and I'm sure it's me. And I really never seriously wavered from that. So at that time then, and I'm not sure if the person started exactly my first year, but I think it must have pretty much in sync. There was a family physician who was well known at the time. He was from Colorado. I'm really bad with names, and so I forgot his name too. But he was well known in the academy too and had a prominence. Anyway, he was in practice, but older, or at least he seemed older at that time. He was probably much younger than I am now. But anyway, so he was family medicine, and he had an office on like the 15th floor, and so I went up to meet him. But it was great, and he was responsible for the fact that my graduating class in '77 had, and Jane Murray will remember the numbers because she's good at stuff like that. I mean, something like 20 students go into family medicine, and it was entirely because he kept our enthusiasm going by having regular, I'll say monthly, but it wasn't monthly, meetings at his house to talk about being a family doctor. And it was interesting. You know Joe Sugar, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Joe Sugar was in the class 2 years ahead of us. And so it wasn't just my class that hung out, but Joe was only one of a couple people in his class because that was even further ahead. Joe's only a year older than me, but 2 years ahead in school. And so he was a role model, too, in terms of somebody who hung out with the rest of us, although there were only a couple students in his class. My husband's class, one ahead, also just had a few students going to family medicine, but my class just really bonded over it, and that's really how it happened. And then there wasn't a couples match, and so it got a little complicated in terms of how we ended up in Kansas. But in my third year of medical school, we went to Kansas because Bruce had agreed that he would go back to my home for residency after he did an internship, and I caught up. So we went and did a rotation, and I did a family medicine rotation, and he did an OB rotation because he did a year of obstetrics after medicine, then went back to medicine. But anyway, so we did this rotation, and it was sort of like, okay, so what are we supposed to do? Because, like I said, there wasn't a couples match. And so we called him up and said, what are we supposed to do, like, about coming here? And they said, oh, well, it's fine. You came and you had a good rotation, right? And you liked it, right? And we said, well, yeah. And they said, well, that's good. So, we'll expect you next year. And so we didn't go through the batch. And the next year we showed up at Kansas.
Wow, cool. So, in your opinion, so it was just really, it was you. You heard the description, and it resonated with who you were, and you joined this merry band of warriors. And so as you've looked at what's happened with the family medicine movement in general, what are you most proud of? What do you think has been done well?
So I think different things have been done well along the way. I mean, the first thing that I was thinking when you said that wasn't the question I expected. And I'm thinking, so remember, I'm always an outlier. And that's just, and I don't mean to be, and I'm not like negative on the edge, but I'm never mainstream in my thinking, which, by the way, even though you didn't ask this, I've got a lot of good media training, so I answer questions that I want to answer, not what I'm necessarily asked.
I understand.
And I also had to be a bit of an outlier, even though I said there was this, it was cute what you said, the merry band of warriors. I'm a good student, and I was well received in medical school. And even at that time, or maybe I should say especially, but I think it is unchanged in many ways, every specialty tried to get me to waver from going into family medicine. and it was downplayed, and it was not well thought of. And a lot of the reasons that I survived was because I'm a very independent, and I don't need outside verification of anything that I do. If I do something well, I feel good about it and pat myself on the back and move on. I don't need outside verification. Sure. And I think it's really has been very, very hard on family medicine. That has never changed, that it's just like there's something second tier about it. So I think early on, back to the answer to one of your questions, is the fact that we could take something that never was overly well received and build it as big as it got built, I think is rather remarkable, because it wasn't that many years before where we were still talking about the LMD, the licensed medical doc, the person in the trenches that didn't know anything. And I was very proud to say what it was that I did, which was to be a family physician and going through a family medicine residency. And so I talked about that a lot, but this is not just about me. This is what I think family medicine did well, to get credentialed, to stake a claim, even if it's sort of moved a little, but to be able to articulate how this wasn't just a general practitioner equal untrained, and really make a place, have zero presence in medical schools, and in a decade have a presence, and in many cases, by then it's probably in most cases already a department, I think was very remarkable. And I'm going to follow that by saying one of probably my chief complaint now, and from the time it happened, was when I went from being a family physician to a PCP, a PMP, a primary care provider, and all those things that I didn't train to be, and all that mushing together of what I am and trained to be compared to what someone in the outside named me. And that just fries me from stem to stern. Are we doing a pregnant pause, or did I lose you?
No, I dropped off there for a moment. If that happens, just keep on talking. I'll dial right back in.
Oh, well, I kept talking, but I'm done talking now.
Okay, I'm glad this is recorded, so I can hear.
Yeah, you missed my passion.
That's what I was hoping for, and I knew it would come, so I'll be able to go back and listen to that. So, what do you think didn't go so well? I mean, there were some really high aspirations. Oh, okay.
You just missed that.
Okay.
So I'll give you the one-liner. The one-liner was not protecting the brand and growing with it, but become thrown in the pot of a PCP and not differentiating ourselves. I mean, I think the very big mistake was to not hold on to who we were. But we did it. It was done backwards. It was done by trying to. This sounds pejorative. I'm sorry, and but the idea that we would try to block a nurse practitioner from getting certain privileges or block someone else. My approach was always like, just be really good at who we are, let people know who we are, and then let people do whatever they're able to do and be credited for. But instead of taking the approach of, we'll hold on to who we are by not letting other people do that thing, because heavens knows I'm happy to give away all the things that others can do, but because I know a whole lot more critical thinking than people who were trained just a few years.
Cinda, I could hug you. I absolutely agree with you. And before I can retire, I'm going to find a way to jumpstart not jumpstart, but to support that, because I absolutely agree with you. So,
well, I thought I would too, Larry. I had thought my own personal regret is that I haven't ever thought up a way to be able to impact that and leave this world or leave this practice with the family medicine that I knew. And that doesn't mean that I still mourn the fact that people don't do all the inpatient, outpatient, and that kind of thing. But that's not the thing that I'm going to mourn. I'm going to mourn
right.
that we don't have our place that is this among all the other specialists in the way that we should. It's because it's one of the 24 boarded specialties, and you wouldn't know it because not a single other specialty has any, to the degree we have, any crisis in identification, either self-identification or by others of who we are.
Right. So when we get done with this interview, Cinda, I'm going to tell you I actually have a strategy for this.
All right, I'm on board. I'm there.
Okay, so I'll tell you. Let me finish with my interview question first, and then I'll tell you.
Okay.
So the next question is, if you had the ear of the young leaders, the ones who are up and coming or just beginning, what would you say to them?
Well, so I do have their ear because they're all my students. And what I tell my students is I put myself in that place. There's that funny commercial on television, but I go to my happy place. I put them in my happy place and describe how it feels to be somebody's family physician. And I do that formally and informally, because I do it formally as well in a talk that I'm going to give in a couple of weeks that I always give to the first-year class. I let students always know that I'm a family physician, that it drives how I think, and I role model it. But at the same time, Larry, I have this sort of torn feeling knowing the challenges that these students have with their debt if they choose to make this choice or a couple other choices where they're disadvantaged in many ways, including financially.
Right.
See, I didn't have any debt. That's a big difference.
Oh, that does make a big difference, yes. So back in the day, I started in family medicine in 1978 at Penn State Hershey.
Mm-hmm.
And for a good long while, family docs would take pride in saying, family medicine's countercultural.
Right.
What do you think they meant by that?
Well, first of all, kudos to you doing a good job, because these are not the routine questions in the way people usually ask them. I know well that literature, and it's very funny that I have spoken to it and read it, and at this moment in time, it's not really coming to me. I mean, I don't feel it anymore about how we were counterculture. So I think, now that since I think out loud, I guess you just figured that out. What was meant was that it was supposed to be about the whole patient and about taking care of families and not a disease-oriented body part specialty. I mean, and then it was supposed to be a holistic way of thinking. I mean, that's how I felt that was meant. And
right.
I think, and I think it also meant that in the days where specialization wasn't as super specialized as it is now, but we were moving towards narrower and narrower areas of specialization, this was counterculture, and it turned it upside down because it was the broadest. So it was the opposite of the direction everything else was going.
Right. Okay. So I'm just trying to think through the questions here as I'm driving along. Those were the key questions. Let me tell you how the strategy that I referred to earlier.
Okay.
So since I started back in 78, I would hear family docs tell stories. And they would just like, the story was so powerful. They weren't bragging. They were just usually quite humbly telling a story. And I would say to them, that's amazing. You know, nobody knows that about you. Would you, that story needs to go public. And they'd go, oh, gee, shucks, I don't know, you know. Cinda, you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm listening carefully.
Okay. Okay, I heard a noise in the background. I thought it might have been you.
It was a choo-choo train.
Okay. You know, for years and years I would hear these stories, and for years and years I responded that way. And then a light bulb went off, and I said, you know, we need those stories. So, Tom Stern, did you know that he was the medical advisor for the Marcus Welby show?
Yes, I would not have come up with that on my own, but I recall that now.
So Marcus Welby, 1970, 71, and 72, there were 3 TV stations in America at the time. It was the most popular show for those 3 years. So for the people who were young then, they have Marcus Welby deep in their brain, and when they hear, so when people who are 50 and older, when you talk to them, they'll say, I wish I had a Marcus Welby. If you talk to people like my daughter, who's 44 now, I said to her, do you know who Marcus Welby is? And she said, Dad, did he play baseball? You know, they just don't have it, and we haven't had, the last things we've had on TV have been, or shows, have been wacko stuff. Patch Adams was the last image in a movie that we had of a family physician. Patch is a family physician in West Virginia. So we don't have anything culturally out there that tells America what is a family physician and why is it a good thing. So long story short, I decided we need to have a new TV show.
That's great.
And the way to get there, because I don't know anything about TV shows or scripting or anything, is to get family docs to tell their story. So I started with my board, and I said to them, you all have what I call power stories. And a power story is one that not only is compelling, interesting, grabs your attention, but it also reveals the inner workings, what Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink calls a blink. It's that mastery that is just there in you because you've had your 10,000 plus hours and you've got all these relationship skills, you've got these clinical problem skills, clinical problem solving, you've got these medical knowledge. It all just flows together into a blink. And so I'm getting family physicians to tell their stories. And when I hear one of these stories, somebody says to me, oh, I saw this patient the other day, and I say, oh my God, that's a power story, you've got to tell that story. They say, gee whiz, I don't want to brag. So I say, well, don't brag then, just describe what you just said. And I've gotten a few of those, so I'm up to 7 right now. We've recorded some of them, and we're going to grow a lot of these over time. And let me tell you about one of the stories.
Okay.
So one of our board members, Amy Crawford Fauché, family doc, she's, I don't know, maybe she's 15 years out, and she had this family, husband and wife, 2 kids, 2 young children, and she'd seen them for many years, knew the family well. The mother was a fairly stoic kind of woman, very focused, very organized, got things done, and the husband was a little bit of a hypochondriacal, if you like. He was always anxious and worried about something. And they had an office visit, and there was husband, wife, and the 2 kids in the room. And Amy walks in the room, and the husband's talking about he's got some kind of twitching in his finger, and he's sure it's something serious, it's a heart attack or it's something. And out of the corner of her eye, she sees the mother, and she notices something's not right. So she breaks off the interview with the husband and says, "Excuse me, Mary, I can tell something's not right. What's going on?" Asks some questions, and then says, "Sit still, don't move. I'm calling the squad right now. You're going to the emergency room." She leaves the room to call the squad. Then she calls the ER doc in the hospital, and the ER doc poo-poos the whole thing, says, "I don't know who's got the problem. Is it your patient or is it you worrying about your patient? This doesn't sound like anything that needs to be seen by me." She sends her anyways, and a half hour later gets a phone call from the ER doc who upbraids her for sending this patient to him in the emergency room when she should have gone to the trauma center in Pittsburgh, because this woman was having a serious, I think it may have been dissecting aortic aneurysm. She saved the woman's life. She saved the woman's life. And so I said to Amy, so what was going on? I mean, there were some cues that you picked up, and then you asked some questions. And so I'm trying to get her to decompact her reasoning. And she says to me, "Well, I had a hunch." And I said, "No, you didn't. I'm a social worker. I get to have hunches. You're a well-trained family physician. There was clinical reasoning. There was clinical problem solving going on here that you just haven't just fleshed out yet." So we now, after 4 or 5 coaching sessions, we have that into a power story. I'll send you a link to it. You can look at it. She told it in front of the rest of the board. It's a powerful story, and it's clearly compelling.
I'm waiting to hear what it was. What did she see?
Pardon?
What was her?
I'll send you the link. I'll try to send it tonight or tomorrow so you can hear it from her own.
Okay.
She figured out a few of the things, the clues, but it's, as I'm sure you know, very hard to. It'd be like asking LeBron James. So, how do you do what you do? I mean, how did you?
Right.
All this stuff is going on. Malcolm Gladwell calls it mastery, and it is. And I think, in Ian McWhinney in his book, A Call to Healing, says that one of the characteristics of family docs when they get together is they don't talk in general principles. They don't talk a whole lot about data. They talk about patient stories.
That's true.
And I think the reason for that is there's this complex mastery that they're telling through the story, and they may not even, in fact, generally not consciously aware of what all the pieces are. So, for example, people will say the Krebs cycle is totally irrelevant to the practice of medicine. Well, I don't think that's true. I think it's actually deeply embedded, especially with patients with subtle and complex problems. You may not know that you're going back to it, but it's actually in there at some level. So trying to get the family docs to tell their power stories, sharing those power stories, and then bringing a collection of those power stories to script writers. Because I think this is like House crossed with Hill Street Blues crossed with, I don't know how to, make these things, TV or media worthy, but it's the drama of human life. It's the excitement of human life. Family medicine's right in the middle of all of it.
I would agree with that. And what I find hard, you said, how do I tell students? I try to talk to them about these kinds of things, and it's really interesting because I think it's really hard. I watch their reactions, and I hate to use the phrase they don't get it, but I think they can see my passion, but they don't feel what it feels like, and that's a really hard thing because I think surgeons can say and show you what it feels like to cut something out and do a good repair. And I get so, I mean, this resonates with, you can pick any one of us, and the whole series could be just about one of us and our patients in a given year, because this is what we thrive on. And it's very, very hard for us as physicians to impart that to other people, to what it feels like, except our patients who get it.
Yes. Yes. So we have to, so the issue with the students, from my point of view, is, especially for the first and second year students, the complexity of what you're talking about, not only in terms of medical knowledge and clinical problems, but in terms of human relationships. Mm-hmm. So a good family physician like you is a master of human relationships. You read the person. You have different strategies for different kinds of people. You form this bond. You offer this relationship, and some people respond and some people don't. But I mean, that's a whole level of mastery in a domain that is separate from what a surgeon would do, what most cardiac. Not that there aren't some who have a little more of that, but I mean, this is a hallmark of being a family physician. Mm-hmm. I think getting these stories, and I actually have hired a writing coach who's written 7 novels herself, who is good at coaching the story part out, and I've been coaching the authors in terms of the medical piece, just pushing them to think deeper, reflect, to get to the metacognition, which is an area of research that I used to do many years ago in family medicine. I love to peel away the layers and to help somebody tune in to their own mastery. I think it's also very therapeutic and affirming for the doc to just take stock of what their mastery really looks like. To me, it's just amazing.
So I think maybe you've come up with something that I had never been able to. I'll tell you how I've thought it out before, but what I've thought about is, I think, impractical, and I still don't know if it would work. So if you take the situation about how do you assess excellence in practice, and everything, or quality, or whatever you want to call it, everything is always reduced to the count. 3 of these, a number greater than that, something less than this. You know what I mean? Yeah. So because it's easy to count, and that's very frustrating to me, because great family physicians don't do the things. They can do things that count. I mean, if that's what's counted, we'll do them. But the intricacies of what you've described. And so let's take, for example, the idea of getting a consult. So then they count consults. So one person gets X number, another person gets fewer. So which is the right thing? But the complexity is why they got a consult, and how you know, and when are you using resources well. And I mean, there's like 20 things that go into excellence in making that choice and doing it well. And I've always thought, how, by not counting but listening to great family docs with their patients, is that what needs to happen to be able to describe the skill set and describe excellence? I mean, so let's say that you were with her when she saw this patient. Would you have been able to call out the aspects of the excellence? And if you did this with some people over time, how long would it take to be able to determine definitions of excellence that could be described?
Interesting. So let me tell you about a nurse researcher I talked to last week. She's at George Washington University. She's about to move to City University of New York. And she did this project she was interested in. She noticed that some family physicians did really well in terms of patient activation. And she could tell that because on average, their patients were getting better. And she was looking at diabetes, I think. So she started with identifying the docs, a cohort of docs whose patients were really getting, on average, much better than the others, so the ones who were the high performers. And then she went and conducted a study, qualitative study, and she queried them about what they do and what strategies they use with their patients and how they think. And she identified 5 characteristics of the high performers. And then she went and looked at the low performers, and she asked them a similar set of questions and found out that they actually didn't think about these things or didn't think about them very much at all. And she wrote that paper up, and I can send you a link to that if you're interested. And I said to her, powerful study. How would you like to be interviewed? Do a little podcast. You can tell your story, because it is powerful, and it's powerful to get out there so people get away from this whole thing of the nano counting as though it actually makes a difference. And again, I think it comes back. This is another kind of storytelling, and I would love to get Family Medicine for America's Health or some of the other, the Graham Center, some of the others, looking at, and I think the Graham Center actually is, they do a fairly good job of trying to get at what you and I are talking about. And I think the Power Story Project and finding other examples where people kind of did a deeper dive into how the family physicians think is really valuable.
So I do too. I think that in a small scale, she did what I was talking about, and I think that's where the answers are. So, some combination of these things we're talking about, and then I get discouraged, and I think, so that's all fine and good. So we can describe why we're good, and then if the payment model doesn't change, it still inhibits the growth of specialty in doing what we do.
So let me tell you about a meeting that we had June 8th in Pittsburgh at the Duquesne Club, which is where the old money hangs out. So we got somebody to get us a room in the Duquesne Club, and we invited business leaders, higher ed leaders, media leaders, any kind of leaders we could find in Western Pennsylvania. 25 of them showed up. One of them was the Pittsburgh Business Group on Health. One of them was the Pittsburgh Council on Higher Education, UPMC, Highmark, a number of others. And we presented to them. I had this guy come in who I've been working with. His name is Jed Constance. He has a presentation on the business case for family medicine, because if you're going to talk to business people, they want to hear the business case. So in 15 minutes, Jed presented that, followed by Amy Crawford telling the story about how she cares for patients, followed by me talking about what the FMEC is doing to support family medicine in Western Pennsylvania. And I will tell you that the business people got all fired up about this. They want to know more. They invited us to come. They're trying to organize. Now, this is the 90 biggest corporations in Western Pennsylvania, U.S. Steel, Alcoa, Google, etc. They're trying to get their CFOs and CEOs to understand their own spend on healthcare and how the insurance companies are kind of messing them over. And so the woman, Diane McClune, said, can we get you guys to come to present to our CEOs about this? We have to find a way to build that linkage and that support, because the insurers will always do what's easiest for them to make money, and they will always disaggregate primary care. And we've got to have partners out there who can put pressure on the insurers to change. So
I agree. That sounds right. Mm.
So
well, I think
have
that's a worthy end of career project. All of that. I mean, it's very meaningful. It feels good to hear it.
Good, good. So one of the things I will encourage you to do, Cinda, you have many power stories. And I would encourage you, now that I've planted this seed, to think of one. And you and I can talk at another time, and you can run some ideas by me, and I can give you my opinion, my feedback, and I would be willing to work with you and to bring this coach in to help these to become power stories. Now, I understand that you're a dean of a medical school, and you have to, you have to be careful and balanced and all of that in your public self. But if these power stories became tools that you could use with your education, with your, talking to the medical students and others, that I think that would be a really cool thing.
No, I agree. I've always sort of mourned the fact that I haven't been, Atul Gawande or anybody who, I read all their stuff and I'm like, damn, I could have written all that. And then I say to myself, no, Cinda, you didn't, because you just saw the patients and, and then moved on and you thought about it, but you didn't write it down at the time. And I don't have a photographic memory. And so I'm left with stories that are incomplete, that I can feel, but that I can't call out, these graphic details.
Well, all I would say, Cinda, is you may not need all the graphic details. And you may find when you put your mind to it that there's more of the pieces there that are retrievable.
Yeah,
now, either from so, in your career, you've had some great stuff happen, and so I would just put that out there. I'm pretty convinced, based on I did this very same thing with Margie Bowman last month.
Mhm.
And we met for coffee, and she's got 3 of them, and they're good ones.
Mhm. I'm sure, but she's continued to be active in family medicine a lot more recent than I have, which helps too. So mine are relegated further back in the memory bank, I'm afraid.
Well,
I'll
interestingly,
tell you,
all 3 of her stories were from before she came to Wright State.
Okay. All right. Well, I will see. So I'll give you, I'm not going to tell you this whole story, but I'm going to tell you the kind of things I remember, which is why I don't think it would work for your story. So, because I called this person today, which is why I'm thinking about her.
Oh.
She actually wasn't available. I've had patients follow me long after I regularly saw patients, but this one, and I would say she's special, but then I say that about many. But anyway, so I called her because I was going to ask her to help me give this talk to my students that I gave last year, and it worked really well, and I got her on the phone because for each of these years, I do a series called What's in Your White Coat with physicians, seasoned physicians who talk about just being a physician. But like I said, we title it What's in Your White Coat because it's a preparatory for having our white coat ceremony, which we don't do at the beginning, but we wait till after we do a curriculum of humanism. And anyhow, so I was getting frustrated each year for the reasons I told you. Not that my talks weren't going over well, but my feeling, the inability to express to the students who at that time don't know me because they're brand new first years, what it feels like to be a family physician. So what I tried last year, I called this particular one up. She was burn nurse in the KU for years, and now she's a nursing administrator. And I said, her name's Sidoni. I said, so Sidoni, like, will you just like be on the phone and tell students what difference it made to have a family doctor and to have me as your doctor? And it was terrific. I mean, it was better than I could have ever done. And she just said how she felt. And I just saw her because I managed to go to her youngest daughter's surpriser at her graduation from high school, because I delivered her, and I delivered her older sister who was there and hugged me lots, and she's been a mess. She's got all these odd social things like so many people do, but she's always felt like I've been there for her. I'm actually her godmother too yet, but that makes it sound like an N of one, but it's not an N of one in any way. It's just a family that I've had contact with more recently, that whenever they just don't know what to do, they call me.
Right. So, just out of curiosity, did you record what she said?
No, but I was calling her today, asked if she'd do it again, so maybe we could, if you think that would be good.
So let me tell you, we got to hang out together more often, I'm telling you. So the other part of this whole power story narrative thing is there is the current myth within academic family medicine that family physicians only take care of the poor. And I know that's not true. You know that's not true. Family docs take care of everybody. Rich people, poor people, celebrities, people living under the bridge. They work with everybody. So the world doesn't know that, though. So what I've been trying to do is get family physicians to approach people who are, I just call it influential. So somebody who has choices, somebody who could go to anybody for their care. I'm talking to somebody up at Mayo who told me at a meeting that in their practice, they take care of a bunch of subspecialists at Mayo, department chairs from other specialties. And I said, would you approach them and ask if they'd be willing to be interviewed? Why do you choose a family doctor? This is part of how you change the culture, the larger culture, whether it's employers, whether it's medical students, and they hear like a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or they hear a nurse administrator, or they hear a CEO of a hospital say, you know, I have a family physician. You know, just imagine if Oprah Winfrey were to say, you know, I have a family physician. Here's why I choose a family physician. America would turn. It would just turn. And we've never, you know, Gail Stevens said, one of the things that Gail said is, when in doubt, go with the patient. And family medicine has never, in my opinion, effectively asked the patients who would love to be asked, because they want to honor their doctor and they want to honor the idea of students becoming family physicians in numbers. So, yes, I think I am determined to get some of these. This is a part of that TV story, ultimately, not the recordings themselves, but just the idea for the, you know, the script writers. That's the dramatic piece. So if you would like to record that, I have the software that would allow that to happen. We, of course, have, you know, consent forms signed and all of that. And the other thing I would say, because I hear this from family docs all the time, well, we can't ask the patient, it violates the doctor-patient relationship and HIPAA. And I said, well, actually, if you ask the patient outside of the exam room, we're working on this project, would you be interested in hearing more? And they say yes. They hear about it, and they say, sure, I'd love to do that. And they sign a piece of paper to that effect. You have a HIPAA-compliant process, and you don't have to worry about a violation of the doctor-patient relationship unless you're trying to talk them into it, but just offer them the opportunity. And quite honestly, Cinda, I'm having difficult time getting family docs who would even bring that issue up to a patient outside of the exam room. So that's part of, in my opinion, what's holding family medicine back is this the stealth cloak that is used. But at any rate, that's just me.
Well, I'm really surprised and sorry to hear that, because that's pretty crazy. I mean, when you're not in the process of delivering patient care, I mean, the patient can say whatever they want. I mean, it's the patient thing. HIPAA is to protect the patient. If the patient doesn't want it pre-protected from whatever they're being asked, that's up to them. That's pretty crazy. But I think all these things that we're saying feeds into it. And another thing you said that it bugs me recently. So you said about we don't only take care of poor people, but family physicians can, or the discipline more than the individuals, kind of wallow in it sometimes. I mean, we wallow in our miseries.
Yep.
And that's what I was saying about, having good self-esteem. On the one hand, we do when we choose to go into it and stick with it and like it. But on the other hand, I don't know if it gets eroded or what. It's just like, oh, yeah, But I don't think it's helped us. What I'm going to say now you may disagree with. But anyway, I don't think it's overly helped us that the latest brilliant idea is to have the continuity of care clinics be FQHCs. I mean, that is staking our claim on only taking care of indigent patients, if that's where you want to train.
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, it's like, so you want to get paid more and you train people that only in an indigent care setting. I mean, that's lofty, but then you're right back where you started or worse in terms of thinking, then why should we pay the family doctor any more than we already do?
Right. So one of the things I've been telling my board is, when we have our regional meeting and we have, 250 or whatever submissions that come in every year, and there's a lot of stuff. One of the things I've never seen is family medicine for the rich.
Well,
and yet we should be. We should be saying everybody deserves good health care, and family medicine is great health care.
So my cynical side would say, oh, I bet somebody submitted it, but it was rejected. I quit coming to STFM for a lot of reasons, because that was my home for 15, 20 years, probably more than that, 25.
Right.
I couldn't get things accepted anymore because I wasn't, this is my opinion, I mean, of course, since I was bitter about it, but I mean, it was like I wanted to talk about new things that I had learned as I became a leader outside of family medicine, but was very important for, as a family physician, and new ideas. And so who's reviewing all of what, as a senior person, I have to say, but junior people who still want to know how you, I don't know, get somebody to quit smoking. And it really began to annoy me. And so I tried to do something about it, and over the years in various settings, I've talked to whoever happened to be the leadership at the time and sort of said, because sometimes they'll moan and say, wring hands, woe is us, we can't keep senior leadership involved. And I say, well, I can tell you why. And so as recently as this year, and I used the timing really well since I got, that STFM Marion Bishop Award, for which, by the way, I was most grateful. And I said, okay, awesome. Thank you. So here's a chance to talk about this. And I did it to some extent when I gave my speech, but I talked to people, and I talked to Bob Graham, and because he says, are you coming next year and whatever, And I said, well, here's the thing. And I told him about that, and he's like, oh no, well, we have to be fair, and we have to have people submit, and you know, it's not fair to go outside I forgot, the program committee, or however he said it. And I'm like, well, so then you'll continue to get what you get. I mean, the whole
Right.
IHI, the system's designed to produce the outcome it gets. You have you have this process. This is what it gets you. This is what it will always get you. And I think that's the reason that it's been so good for me to start my own school. I mean, as I said, I've always been never the right answer, no matter what thing that I did. But you start your own school, you do it your way. So that's my answer. Start your own school. But anyway, but it really does make a difference, and it's validating. It's validating that you can do things different. You don't have to get them right the first time, but you have to be well-schooled in how you do them, and you have to set a culture that says, if I didn't get it right the first time, I don't have to, like, say, oh, man, I'm really sorry. I say, well, this one didn't work out so well. I just invented it last year, so we'll change it next year. And you know, you can really do so much if you just think that there's different ways to do it than you've always done it before. Now I'm ready to be off my soapbox, sorry.
Okay. Well, so let me tell you what we've done with the FMEC. So I recognized that a long time ago, that the process where they're super worried about, and I get equity and fairness and justice and all that kind of stuff. I absolutely get that. On the other hand, as an organization, you're trying to achieve in your certain ends, and you're trying to build communities of leaders, and I think STFM should be doing that. And so what we've done within the FMEC is last weekend, Friday and Saturday, I was with 4 individuals, and we had all of the data from the reviewers who looked at the 250 submissions, workshops, seminars, and that committee made the decision about what met peer review standards, if you like, and would be accepted. And people were moved around, like workshops became breakfasts, and workshops became seminars, and et cetera. So there was a peer review process, and everybody is there. Independent of that, we reserve rooms within the meeting for special programming that relates to FMEC projects. We have a global health learning community. We have a pipeline project. We have a low birth weight project. And separate from the peer review process, we make decisions about who to invite, what we want presented, because we want to have programming that speaks to all of the levels. We believe that it's important for chairs and residency directors and pre-doc directors and students and residents, everybody, to have a place where they can come and rub shoulders, have hallway conversations. And I watched that break down over the years in the national organization. So we're really intentional, and we're very upfront about it. Occasionally, somebody will come to us with a proposal for a project that they want to get going, and can they create space within the regional meeting, and we will do that. So I think it's possible to be a both-and organization, but to do it in a way that you don't have to worry about the fairness issue. So
I agree.
That's
well,
my
you've
opinion.
done an amazing job. I mean, it's a wonder to behold. I mean, you have continued on something sustainable that really dropped off, you know, all the other areas of the country and regional STFM meetings and that kind of thing. I mean, it's pretty cool. Do you have succession planning? What's going to happen when you don't take the lead of this anymore?
So we have been working on that, yes. So the first, stage 1 is we're building the infrastructure, so I've just hired a couple more staff. We have we've identified 5 funding streams. So we have created an academic partners program, so we're going to